Hello everybody, this is Courtney with Fiber Fox Studios, and today we're going to take this beautiful granny square motif and we're going to join these together and make a Bolero. So you'll be able to follow with the tutorial on how to do the square separately, and I will link that down below and also have it pop up as an info icon on the screen. But we're going to go ahead and get started with, this is for those of you who have already made squares up. You will be able to start joining them to form this Bolero. And if you are doing that project with me, please go ahead and refer down to the description to see how many squares you need, because it's going to depend on which size you're making as to the number of squares you will need in order to make your project. And when we join them, we're going to be ending up with a large rectangle. And this is what they look like joined, for those of you who are just curious of what it's going to look like once you join them. I did a really simple join. I just did a little slip stitch join all the way down, and this is going to make it have a defined right side, the side that'll face out, and then a wrong side, the side that faces in. Actually has this little ridge. You could do a single crochet join as well. So bring that up to the camera so you can see. Just have that little bump there that is at the seams. And I did not end up blocking my squares. I just went ahead and worked with them. They line up really nicely as long as you kept your tension even. And obviously you'd be using the same size yarn, even if you were going to do different, like a striping effect, doing different colors or something. As long as you use the same size yarn, it should work out perfectly with the squares joining up just as they need to. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to show you guys how to do the join. And like I said, just pop down to that description and you'll find the number of squares you need for your size. So if you haven't started your squares yet, you'll get that information down below. I'll also be adding that to that video now that I know. And then we're going to go ahead and get started here. I'm going to show you the join real quick, and then we will come back when you have your panel all joined up together, and we will go ahead and form the Bolero and do an edging on it. So we're going to get started by grabbing a couple of the squares. So if you take a look at your square, and I'm going to lower my camera down for you guys so you can see. So if you take a look at your square, now that we're now up and close on this right here is my back side of my square. And you can identify that because the stitches don't look flat. They just have a different look. The right side, you see more of the smoothness of your stitch. So if you take a look at your work, you're going to make sure that you know your right side and wrong side. So you want the nice smooth look to be on the outside of your project facing outward. So when you are joining though, you're going to be joining on the back side. So if you take a look, you can see it's kind of bumpy looking. Hopefully that's showing in the camera with this color yarn. I think you can see that though. For more experienced crocheters, you're going to be able to identify them very easily. But for those of you who are just starting, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about here, hopefully in the camera. They don't look smooth. You can see the actual stitches, like the bumpiness to them. Hopefully that makes sense. So we want to make sure that we are working with the wrong side facing out towards us when we do our join. So we're going to grab two squares, and the way that you're going to line this project up, the best suggestion I have for you is to get your two squares, and you're going to be joining on the seam on the side. And you're going to line up depending on what size you're making, and it's noted down in the description. You'll be lining up, 5 across, 6 across, or 7 across. So you'll join 7 of them going side by side by side until you have something that looks like this right here. Guess I should have left the camera up a little bit. But I'm joining them in a long row, and then we'll take those long rows and we'll be able to do a long join together to start forming that large rectangle that we need to make our Bolero. So it's a really, really simple construction. So we're going to start working right now with joining these two squares. So you make sure that you've identified your wrong sides, And you'll just line them up best as you can. And I'm going to raise my camera up just a little bit so you guys can see what I'm doing here. So we have them where we're just lining up, finding the best fit. You want it to be as close, you know, in size as possible. Our tension's not always going to be exactly the same. You're going to work on squares, you know, over a number of days or even weeks possibly, depending on what all you have going on. So just find the side that seems to fit the best. For mine, they're pretty much about all the same size, but what we're going to do is we're going to grab the same needle that we've been working with, the same needle, the same crochet hook that we've been working with, and we're going to start in the corner to do our join. So for you guys to see what I'm doing, I'm going to use a different color yarn. You, of course, are going to use the exact same yarn that you've been working with on this project, and we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to show you where to join on. This is pretty much the same for each and every one of these, and I'll show you how I do the long join here in just a moment, because my project is almost ready. I'm a little ahead of you guys, but I'm going to be doing a slip stitch join, or you of course can do a single crochet. And for some of you, if you prefer doing the yarn needle, you absolutely can do that as well. The main thing we want to see here is where do we go into and how do we join them. So on these corner stitches right here, these corner chains, there's 5 chains here in the corner. So we just want to identify the 3rd chain. That's in our center. So we've got 1, 2, and here's number 3. And again, remember, wrong side facing out at this point. And now here over on the other side, we want to do the same thing. We want to find that 3rd chain. So we can start right here, and you can turn it so that you can see those V's, so it helps you be able to identify what is a stitch. So there's 1, 2, and this is going to be my 3rd one. So we're just going to go into that 3rd one on the other side. So now we are essentially just in the exact corner of our piece. And I'll go ahead and lower back down so you guys can see a little bit closer. All right, so for tutorial purposes, I'm going to use this pink yarn so y'all can see. So I've got a little slip knot here on my hook, or I'm about to put it on my hook. I've got it ready. So I'm going to put on a little slip knot and leave a decent tail so that you can weave that in and knot it off and everything. And we're going to go ahead and grab and just pull through that chain on this side and go ahead and pull through the chain on the other side. And now I like to just grab that tail and working yarn and do 1 chain. And now at this point we can kind of position our squares. So I grab over in the opposite corner. So I'm right here in this corner. I'm going to grab over here, and I do the same thing on this side, and I just kind of stretch it and pull where I have this nice even side to work on. And it doesn't matter which side you start with, because these are, you know, all the same size, you know, squares. Every side is the same length. That's what I'm trying to say. So now what I'm going to do is I like to go into the very next stitch. And that might be a little bit hard for you guys to see depending on what color you did. But just do the best you can to find that very next stitch and slip your hook in. And then I do the same thing over here on this back side. I find the very next stitch and I go right into that. So very next one, they'll be lining up just like that. And I let that tail just fall out of my way. I don't need it right now. So we go ahead and we grab our yarn and we just pull through that first loop back there and go ahead and pull through that second. I'll wiggle it. And now we're just going to go ahead and pull through what's left on our hook. And that is our first slip stitch. So now we're going to be doing that all the way down in each and every stitch best we can. If you miss one, it's not going to be the end of the world. Not in my opinion. I'm sure I've missed 1 or 2, but you can't tell once it's all together. So we just slide in. We make sure we're going into a loop on each side. So you can go into the complete stitch. You can just find a loop on each side like I'm doing. Nothing is incorrect when it comes to joining up a granny square, in my opinion. As long as the end result is that you have a nice, even seam, you're good in my book. So now I've made it to this point right here. I've actually got a top of a stitch to work into, so I'm going to go into that, and then I'm going to do the same thing over here on the other side. You can see it's lining up. I've got the same stitch top to go into, so I'm going to grab my yarn and pull on through, grab my yarn still and pull on through the loop that's on my hook. So that's just what we're doing all the way down, and we're going to form a long rectangle, long thin rectangle as we join these. So you're going to be doing a fairly short join because we can't, some of you may want to, you know, work them all together in a different way. So whatever way works for you, you just want to go with the configuration that I've got down there in the description. That way you end up with the long, wide rectangle. So that's the main thing, is we just need that final shape to end up being a long, wide rectangle. Obviously for the smaller sizes, small through, I believe, extra large, you only have 15 squares needed to form yours, so it's not going to be huge or anything. It's a Bolero, so they're not meant to be really big. So you're just going to keep working that same way on down, and we'll meet back up at the end of this join, and I'll show you guys how I bind off and how I hide these little tails, what I do about those. You, of course, can sew them in whatever you're comfortable with, but I'll show you guys what I do. So we'll meet back up in just a moment after we finish going on down the rest of this side and joining that. And we'll come back when we're over here in this corner. All right, so we're meeting back up. We're over here at this corner. This is what my join's looking like so far. And we're over here, we've got that chain 5 again. So just like we began this, we're going to work into the first 3. So we're going to make sure we end up in that corner stitch. So I've gone into the very first chain here at the corner. We're just going to slide on in there, grab our yarn, slip it on through, and do that until we've done it 3 times total. So you just want to end up right there in that corner, exactly in the middle. So there's a second, and this very next stitch is my 3rd. So if it gets a little tight, you just wiggle in there until you get it. Make sure you're going in each side, a loop in each side minimum. Try not to split your yarn. That's what I'm doing. All right, so now I've finished up. I'm right there dead center in the corner. And I like to, since I'm making a long, thin rectangle, I like to chain 2 and clip my yarn. And then I bind off. Now, I'm not going to do a permanent bind here, but you would just cinch it down. And then, because I'm going to change this yarn out, obviously, I need these squares. So when you are done and you've clipped your yarn, when you lay it back out flat, you now have this ridge, which you guys can see very, very well because of the different colored yarn. And I've still got my wrong side facing out towards me. So I'm looking at the wrong side. The other side, when we turn that over, the other side has the smooth stitches, and if this yarn was the same color, you would not see it. So you're going to keep joining on the side like this, just as I'm showing here, until you have long rectangles, just like this right here. Voila. Magic of YouTube and pause on the camera. So we're going to keep joining just on one side all the way down. So you're going to do that, and you're going to form your strips essentially, and then you'll be able to join those into the panel. So for me, I've got to join on 2 more squares to this long strip that I just showed back here. And then I'm going to be able to come back and show you guys how I work these on to this panel. So my long strip just gets joined right here. As you can see, I just do a long join. So I have it folded in this way, working with my wrong side facing out on this side as well. And then I join just like we were doing all the way down in a long row. So You don't have to, you know, clip yarn as often this way. So we'll make those long strips, and then we'll start forming the long strips in to this panel that I'm showing you guys. And I'll come back in just a moment and we will start joining one on. It's the same technique though, so you can fast forward to the portion of the video a few minutes from now where we are actually folding the piece and creating the Bolero and doing that join. And then we're going to go ahead and put our edging on it. And for those of you who do want to see the way that I do my ends, I have chained up 2, and I'm going to go ahead and just pull that on through. I clip the yarn, of course, and then I just grab right above that chain 2 I made and kind of pinch with my fingers, and then I pull back on the tail, and I slide my fingers down with that, cinching in, creating a little knot. That's my preferred method. If you don't like knotting, you do not have to do that. You do whatever way you want. But I'm going to go in right here. There's a little, this is part of our join. Right here, I've had to change out to my correct color of yarn. So this is part of the slip stitch join right here. I just go into this first little space, first little, it's kind of a V. I know it's probably not showing very well, but just go right here behind that knot you made is my point. And I slip in my hook. So I just go right underneath there and insert my hook right behind. This is my open side where I haven't joined it. So I'm right here on my join, just like I'm showing you guys. And I grab that yarn and I pull it back here. And I just feed it through a few of these. I just go in to a few of those slip stitches. Direction and all that doesn't really matter. We just kind of want to move that tail off of the edge, so that it's out of our way when we start to join this to the rest of the squares. But at some point when I get it a few back, what I like to do is I like to grab that tail and go ahead and chain, pull up a chain, a loop, and then I chain 2, just like that, and then I pull that tail through again, and then I grab, and you don't want to pull like super tight, but I just cinch it down so that it makes a little knot right there. I know some of you disagree with knots, so by all means, I'm not saying this is correct. I'm just showing you what I personally do. And so I go ahead and go again into the very next stitch, whatever loop I can find and pick up, and I grab that yarn and pull up that loop again, and then I grab and pull up another loop, grab and pull up again. So I chain 2 more times, pull that on through, and then cinch it down. So just grab and cinch down, and it just forms a really secure join because I'm going to be wearing this, so I'm going to be stretching on it, and that's why I'm showing you, because I don't know that just sewing in back and forth in a few directions would be sufficient for something like this that you're going to wear, and it's going to get stretched. You're going to be putting it on, taking it off at the end of your day. So you may want to do this method. And when I clip this, I do it at least twice. If you have a long enough tail where you can do it again, doesn't hurt anything. But you want to clip not right up on the knot that you've made. And hopefully that'll focus so you guys can see. So I just go right above it, just a little bit. I leave just the tiniest little amount of yarn. And what I have found after this piece gets washed, or if I do something like this where I go back and forth, it blends in and you don't see it anymore. So, and if you don't do what I just did by, rubbing right over where the knot was, when you wash it, it also just tends to kind of tuck itself in a way, and there's not enough tail there for it to really be noticeable. So that's how I do my bind off on something like this, and pretty much every project I do. So you just go ahead and do the same thing down here on this other tail where we began. Do the same exact thing, and then you keep joining, making it longer and longer. So my next join will be right here, and watch that direction of your square. This took me so long to get to the point to film it because the other night I started joining squares and I had some facing with the outside that we're gonna see. I had it turned in here. So I had them flipped, wrong side, right side. It was a mess. I had to undo all my joints and take it all apart. So I do that every time I work with granny squares. So just pay attention. For me, having one of these turned the wrong way where you're seeing the ugly side, you know, facing out would bother me in my project. If it doesn't bother you, then don't worry about it. But for me, it bothered me. So I had to basically undo almost the entire rectangle. So here we are back finally today getting to film this. So we'll be back in a moment. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to show you guys how I join the long rectangle strips that we've made in form that large rectangle that will be forming into the Bolero. Alright, so now we've got this long, for me, mine are 6 of the squares over for the smaller size because it's a most, one size fits most type situation on the Bolero because this square is so stretchy, it's so forgiving. It's going to be 5 going across forming the long, thin rectangle for the smaller sizes, and then my size, which is the 1X, for that size range that's listed down below, it's 6 across. So I've got my 6 squares joined right here along the sides, and once you start getting so many of them joined, it's easy to tell that's your wrong side that it's facing up at you. So then you will begin joining them. So you'll make, you know, at least do 2 of these to start off with. You have something to join to. And you'll just make sure you're lined up at the end. You want to make sure that your last square on your little chain of these, or little strip, I should call it, strip of these granny squares is lining up to the end of your other strip. And they will line up really nicely. If they're not lining up, then you can always block them. You can do just a wet block just to kind of force them into submission for you. So it's easier for you to work with. So you'll line up 2 long rectangle strips that you've made. And you'll just start joining right there in the center. And I just like to make sure that my seams right here, and I'll lower the camera a little bit so you guys can see. Alright, so I just like to make sure that my joins, the raised join, that's one of the reasons why I like to do it this particular method, just my personal preference, is I'll make sure that those are lining up. So now at this point, you can utilize a few stitch markers just in a couple places going on down to pin it together so that nothing shifts on you. You're going to do the same exact join that I already showed you when we were joining these 2 squares together here at the one side. You're going to do that same exact join all the way down. You'll just be going in a long strip. And you'll keep joining, making your long strips of granny squares and joining it to your existing strips of granny squares. So for my size, I ended up joining a total of 4 long strips, and there were 6 of them per strip. So I have a total of 24 on my particular size for a total of 24 squares that are all joined together. So you're going to go ahead and finish that joining, and then you're going to come back to me when you have a nice long wide rectangle. Depending on the size you're doing, that's going to change, you know, how big it is. And then we'll go ahead and get started on actually folding it in and forming the Bolero and starting that border, the trim that's going to go around the arms and around the center, around your chest neckline and in the front edges so that it looks nice and pretty and finished. So we'll be back in just a moment to do that together. And for those of you who are joining your long strips together now, I just wanted to show you real quick how I handle when we get to that ridge that's made by our join. So I'm lining up where my ridges, that's where I've actually done my pins, is at those ridges that are formed by our join on those strips. So when I get to one of the points where I have the ridge on each side, I actually have been skipping over that instead of fighting with it trying to find a stitch to go into. I actually have just been skipping over that, not getting too tight, but going in the very next stitch right beside it on each side of my panel or strip. And I just go ahead and do my slip stitch, and I just don't get it, I don't cinch it tightly. I just kind of allow the stitch to stretch to take up the amount of space it needs to. And you guys have already seen my panel laid out in front of you, so you can tell it's really not noticeable at all. Since this is so lacy, it just works with it really well. So that is how you're going to handle those areas. Don't fight with them. Just skip over it and do your slip stitch across here to the stitch right after that you can actually work into. So I just wanted to show that real quick. So the next time we'll be back, we'll be forming the Bolero. All right, so we're back. We've got our finished long wide rectangle. I am fitting as much of mine in camera as possible, but as you can see, I just can't get it all in. So we're going to go ahead and do the quick little fold that we have to do in order to form the Bolero. So I'm going to turn my project so you guys can see the two ends, hopefully close enough. All right, so all we're going to do is go up to your top corner up here. I know it's probably not in view, and you're going to fold it down. So now you can see my right side is facing up. So now let's shift this just a little bit. Now I'm going to come down here to the bottom corner, and I'm going to fold it as well. So I've basically formed just a triangle here on the side, and my two edges of my top and bottom corner are now here together. So that's where I'm going to place a stitch marker to hold those together. And I go into the third stitch, just like we did before when we were joining these. I keep everything into that third stitch because this is a chain 5. So the third stitch is the dead center right there in the middle. So that's where we want to just pin those together. And then you're going to repeat the same process over there on the other side. Hopefully you guys can see what you need to do. You're just simply folding it over. So just making a little triangle here, make a little triangle right here. Those two triangles meet, and right here is our arm opening. So you're going to go ahead and do the same thing on your other side, and then we're going to start doing our edging, and you'll be able to choose. You do not have to do the edging. You can wear it just as it is. It is really pretty. But at this stage, once you get this pinned, and you can pin it a little bit tighter so those hold together, you can go ahead and try it on at this stage and see how you're liking the fit. Keep in mind, the stretchy, it's a Bolero, so it's not meant to be super long or anything like that. So this may not be something that everyone would choose to wear and would like to wear, but for those of you who are watching this, I'm sure you want to wear it. So we're going to go ahead and come back now next to start doing our edging, and I'll show you how we join this together where it's a permanent join. Right here, it's super simple, but I'll be lowering my camera down for that so you guys can see what I'm doing. But we are hitting the home stretch. You are about to be finished. Like I said, though, you do not have to do this next step of adding along like a border and edging to the project and an edging to the sleeve. You don't have to do that. You can skip it. So if you're skipping that step, you're basically finished, and we just need to join this together. So we'll do that in just a moment. All right, so now we're ready to go ahead and do this join right here. Hopefully you guys can see that well enough. We're going to actually be turning our project back where our wrong side is back facing out. So right now, if you take a look at your project, when you did that fold down, this is the right side of the granny square right here and over here on this part. So we are going to do a join from this corner edge where we join those two granny squares together. We're going to do a join right along in here. So that's why we want to flip it back the other way. So all you need to do is take your work and fold it back. You can grab the wrong side. You can find it by your ridges. And you want to just fold it back like this. So what we're going to do at this point is I'm going to go ahead and turn the project in a manner where I can work with it. And we can go ahead and remove the stitch marker out of our way. And we're just going to get into that third stitch. So we want to find that again. 1, 2, 3 for me. And then on this side, 1, 2, and 3. Hopefully you guys can see. We're just going to count those stitches 1, 2, 3. So we're in that corner chain. of this these two granny squares that are now meeting. So we're going to go in, and each person can decide how far in to go. In my case, I'm going to be going in 3 inches. And when I measured 3 inches, that is from this point right here where my hook is inserted. It actually ended up landing right here at this single crochet join right there. It's part of our, when we were coming around on that final row of the granny square. So I'm going to about halfway point on the granny square. Now you can choose to come in a little bit more, go and make a longer join here. It really depends on how wide you want your sleeve to be opened. So for your actual sleeve size, when we start doing the border around this, where you join to is going to determine the finished total width of that sleeve. So just kind of keep that in mind. So I'm recommending for most of the sizes, the plus sizes anyway, coming in at least 3 inches, which is about 12 stitches, just to kind of give you guys an idea of what I did on my other side. I did 12 stitches across to get to this point. But if you want to make yours less open and wide, you're going to actually just join up a little bit more. You guys that have done the smallest size, you may want to just join up the same amount of distance as me, or you might want to join about 1 inch less. So it really depends on each person and how you're going to want that sleeve to fit. So I'm going to go ahead and join on with some yarn real quick, and I'm just going to show you real quick how we go about the join. So same thing as always, I put a slip knot here on my hook, and I'm just going to go ahead and pull it on up through those stitches that I put my hook through, and now I'm just going to chain 1, and then I'm going to go right there to the very next stitch and insert my hook, and I'm going to make sure that on the back side I'm doing the exact same thing, inserting my hook into each side of the granny square so we actually join them. And then I'm going to pull up a loop and go ahead and pull through the loops that are on my hook. So it's the exact same join going into the very next stitch. We're just doing that slip stitch join is what I'm showing you. Now I'm going to grab my yarn and pull it through those 2 loops and on through the loop that's on my hook. So you'll keep working just in the same exact manner on down for the length that you want for your join. And then of course you can slip in a stitch marker and go try your piece on again before you decide if that's exactly where you want it. And remember, you can always add more yarn on if you do clip and decide you don't like it. You can always add on more yarn and join a little bit more, and you can always clip the knot that you made and go ahead and, you know, undo some of it and have a little bit less of a join. So you can kind of play around with what works best for you and how you want this piece to fit. But for me, I'm going to be doing 3 inches in, and that's going to kind of bring my sleeve down. My sleeve would have been way too wide if I had left it as it was. So go ahead, pause here, finish joining up. I recommend the 3 inches, but totally up to you. And we'll meet back up when you're ready to go ahead and put on the border. I'm going to show you guys, it's a really pretty simple border, and you of course do not have to do this border. You can do any border that you like. No border at all. It's totally up to you, but we'll go ahead and get started on that in just a moment. So I'll be right back to show you the border. Alright, so you're meeting back up with me here. You've done your join right here at the sleeve where we had met those 2 triangles together in the corner. We started right there. We've joined over, and now we have what is left is going to be our sleeve opening. So the border for the area around the sleeve, as well as the area that is around the neckline and down in the front of the Bolero, is going to be the same for what I'm about to show you. So you're going to, at this point, make sure that you're turning your piece back right side out. So, because we're just going to be working around just like we did with the granny squares, and we're going to do row after row in the same direction. We won't be turning our work. So you're going to want to have your right side back facing out so that your border is facing out right side when you put this on. So I'm just going to join on, and you can pretty much pick any spot. I'm recommending that you join on past. This is where we joined now that we've turned it right side out. So I'm recommending that you join somewhere past here, about 2-3 inches down. It's really up to you. It doesn't matter, but I like to hide where I'm continuing my rows when I slip stitch to end my row. I like to hide that as much as possible. So we're going to go ahead and grab more yarn, insert into a stitch. I chose about 3 inches down from the join that we just made. And so I'm over here in this little section where we have the double crochets and all, right there in that section, or triple crochets, whatever it is. So we're going to go ahead and, can't remember which way we did that stitch right now. We're going to go ahead and get another slip knot ready, and we're going to just insert our hook into any stitch and go ahead and do a chain 1 after we pull up that slip knot. So we just pull it up just a bit, grab our tail and working yarn that I'm struggling with at the moment, and do 1 little chain. Now I'm going to let that tail fall because I'll work that in at the end. And I'm going to chain up 2 more times, and this is going to count as my first double crochet. And I also want to note here that I have switched down to gonna 1/2 millimeter size down on my crochet hook. So I'm using a 4.5. Before I was using a 5 millimeter. So you do want to drop your hook size by a 1/2 millimeter, and you're going to go ahead and work your border in your first round of the border in the 1/2 millimeter size smaller. So we're going to get started with the first round. So like I said, the chain 3 is counting as our first double crochet. So we're going to go ahead and wrap our yarn around our hook, and we're going to go into this next stitch. So the chain 3 is coming out right here. So we're going to count that as our first stitch, and we're going to count this stitch as being worked already. So we're going to go right here to the very next chain, and we're going to insert our hook, and we're going to grab and pull up a loop. We are going to grab and pull through 2 and grab and pull through 2 to complete a double crochet. So you're going to work all the way around, going into 1 double crochet into each of the stitches all the way around until we meet back up. We'll join up, and then we'll start on row 2 of our border, but that's what you're going to do all the way around on this row. 1 double crochet into each stitch. And if you're having trouble, if you crochet too tightly and you get to one of these chain spaces and you're having trouble working into those, you can just work the double crochet around the chain if you need to. I'm able to get right into mine, so just keep in mind you don't want to add in stitches. So if you have 5 chains in the section, you would have 5 double crochets in this section. So you just want to match your stitch count on these double crochets to what is there. So you're going to keep working, and you can go ahead and pause here, and we will meet back up in just a moment to join this row and move up to row 2 of our border. Alright, so we have made it around on row 1 of our border, and we're going to go ahead and do a slip stitch to join onto this chain 3. So we're going to just count up 1, 2, and find the top of that chain 3, go right there into that stitch, right there, and just grab your yarn and pull it through, and pull it through the loop that's on your hook to slip stitch that there. So now we can go ahead and do a chain 3 to move up to our next row, and we're actually going to do a double crochet right here in the very next stitch. So the stitch that this chain 3 is coming out of, chain 3 is counting as our first double crochet. So we're just able to move right here to the very next stitch, and we're going to do a double crochet. So you're going to wrap your yarn around your hook, go right there into the top of that next stitch, and go ahead and pull up a loop, grab your yarn and pull through 2, grab your yarn and pull through 2. So now what we're going to be doing for the remainder of the border, we're going to chain 2, we're going to skip 2 stitches down here on this previous row. So we're going to skip 2 double crochets and go right here into the third and do a double crochet. And right in the stitch right beside it, we're going to do a double crochet. Now we're going to chain 2 again, 1 and 2. We're going to skip 2 stitches, and we're going to go right here into the third and do a double crochet. And right there in the stitch directly beside it, we are going to do a double crochet. And again, we're going to be skipping 2 stitches, or chaining 2 and skipping 2 stitches. And then we're going to work in the 3rd stitch a double crochet, and right there beside it we're going to work another double crochet. So you're going to keep working in the same manner. We'll come back and do row 3 together, and then from there you can decide how wide of a border you would like, and you'll be able to finish up, and then you'll be able to use the same border over on your other sleeve and around the edge of your top, the bottom edge, the neckline, and so forth. So we'll be back in a moment when we work all the way around. We'll be meeting up to finish off this row. Alright, so we're coming on around, meeting up, and we're going, here's the beginning of our row. So we're going to just chain 2, and we're going to slip stitch into the top of that 3rd chain just like we did before. And if you find that you do not have enough space, or you have 3 stitches down here, 3 double crochets from the previous row, and you don't have enough to do a full set of these right here, or you have one too many stitches, all you need to do is do the same, fake it basically, is you would do your 2 double crochets, chain 2, and just skip that remaining 3 stitches if that's the situation you come into. And so you would skip 3 down here and join in. It is not going to make a huge difference, and it's not going to be extremely noticeable. Everybody's piece will be slightly different because you may need to make adjustments for your size, or you may decide to do your sleeve join a little further in, make it a little bit longer than mine, or you might make it a little bit shorter. So it's going to vary per person how many of these sets of stitches you're going to be able to do on the sleeve. So just keep in mind, you can always do a little tiny adjustment that no one will notice. In my case, I was going to end up having my stitches not have any space in between them. So what I did here is I actually did the 2 double crochets into 1 stitch, then I skipped 2 and did my chain 2, and then I did 2 double crochets into these next 2 stitches, chain 2, and technically down here I only have 1 stitch to skip. You just want to make sure that you do the same thing on the other side. So if you run into this problem on this side, in theory you should have the same exact issue on your other sleeve, and if you don't, you want to just make sure that you end up with the same number of sets of 2 double crochet chain 2s on the other side. So make the adjustment over there just to make sure that your sleeves end up the exact same size and they look even. So now we're going to go ahead, and for the rest of our rows, this is how we're going to be working. We're going to go ahead and slip stitch over here into this very next stitch. Just grab our yarn, pull it on through, pull it through the loops on our hook, and now we're going to need to slip stitch into the chain 2 space. So grab your yarn and pull it up, and then go ahead and pull it through the loop that's on your hook. And now you're just going to chain up 3, 1, 2, 3. That's counting as your first double crochet. Now you're going to wrap your yarn and go back into this chain 2 space and do another double crochet. Now you will chain 2, 1 and 2, and you'll be jumping over here into this next chain 2 space, placing 2 double crochets. So there's my first, and here's my second. Now we're going to chain 2 again and jump over into the next chain 2 space. So that is all we are doing all the way around this row, and the number of rows that you decide is up to complete is up to you. I'm going to show you in just one moment the sleeve that I created on my other side. I did a total of 5 rows, and so I'll be jumping over there in just a second to show you that, so you can see what your finished border will look like. So we're going to go ahead and pause here for me, and I'm going to show you that sleeve. You're going to continue to work on yours, and you can build it up for as many rows as you'd like. I did a total of 5 rows of these 2 double crochet chain 2 spaces. So this little pattern that we've created, we're on number 2 of those, which is actually our 3rd row of our sleeve. So we've got our double crochets that do our first row, and then we begin doing this pattern on up. So I had a total of 7 rows when I finished my sleeve, and I'll show you guys that now. Alright, so here's what my sleeve ended up looking like. So we have our first row right here, and that was done in just the 1 double crochet into each stitch. And then we moved up where we were doing 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets all the way around. And as you'll see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows of that. And then I just ended out my project with a row of double crochets, 1 into each stitch. In the chain 2 spaces, I just placed 2 double crochets, and then I ended the very edge by doing a slip stitch all the way around the edge. And we've seen the slip stitch repeatedly throughout this pattern because that's how we did our joining, but I just felt like it gave me a nice finished look to the edge of my sleeve. Now I'm going to be doing the same border around the rest of the body of the Bolero. So let me fold this and raise my camera up. Alright, so you can see my sleeve right here, and then along this edge I'm going to be placing the same exact border all the way around the rest of my project, going down around the bottom edge, on around here, because it's basically just formed a little continuous loop. So I'm going to work all the way around, including up here by the neckline. I will just be doing a few less rows of this because I don't need this to really widen up too much, but I did want my sleeve a little bit longer to cover more of my arm. So you're going to keep working in the same way, finishing out your sleeve, and then you will move over to the body section and work on your body and finish up your other sleeve, and you'll be finished. So I'll be coming back to show you guys the final border edge when you've worked up the number of rows that you want. I will do a real quick review of how we do this final row on the border and the slip stitch, and then you will be able to work the rest of the pattern just in the same way as far as the border goes anyway. You'll be able to work the rest of the border in that same exact way. So we'll be meeting back up one more time to finish this out. So I'll be back momentarily for you guys. I'm going to finish working on my piece and we'll come back together in a moment. Right, so you're meeting back up with me and you've finished out the desired number of rows for your border stitching. So now we're going to go ahead and do the final row and slip stitch row. So I guess technically 2 rows, final 2 rows of the border. So what we're going to do here is we've joined on, we have our chain 2 from our last set of 2 double crochets, chain 2. And so I just did a slip stitch right here in that chain 3. So we've been joining that way throughout this border. So now we're going to chain up a total of 3, 1, 2, and 3. That's going to count as our first double crochet. So now all we're going to do is place a double crochet right there on the top of that next double crochet. And we are going to place 2 double crochets in the chain 2 space to maintain our count. So there is 1 double crochet, and here's the second, just working right there around that chain 2 space. And then I am going to place a double crochet in each of the next 2 double crochets from the previous row. So 1 in each. There's number 2. And then we're back there to that chain 2 space. So just like we did before, we are going to place 2 double crochets into that chain 2 space. So this is how you work this row right here. And of course you can always skip this, you don't have to do it, but you can go ahead and finish up this row, and then we will meet back up one more time to do the slip stitch real quick. I will show you how I did the slip stitch around the edge of this to finish off, and then we will be ready for you to move on to the last, do your other sleeve and do the inside and edges of the border for around your neckline and the body part of the actual Bolero, and then you'll be finished up. So I am going to meet back up with you in just a moment. Alright, so you're meeting back up with me here. We're going to go ahead and slip stitch to the top of that chain 3. We've made it all the way around on this row, or round, whichever way you want to look at it. So I'm just going to insert there into the top of that chain 3. Go ahead and pull my loop on through and on through the loops on my hook. So now we've done our very first slip stitch. So we just go ahead and begin doing our slip stitches on around 1 in each of these stitches. So this very first one that I just made, I do recommend that you grab a stitch marker and slip it in there. That way, when you make your way around, there'll be no misunderstanding of where to stop when you're doing the slip stitch row, if you choose to put that on. So from here, we're just going to work into the very next stitch, doing the same exact thing. I'm going to grab our yarn, pull it on through, and pull that on through the loop that's on our hook. So you just work in that exact same way all the way around until you meet back up with that stitch marker that you placed. And then you are finished. So you will be able to move on to your other parts of the top that require a border around them. It's completely up to you on where you're placing the border, the number of rows that you want to do on the border, or if you want to do a completely different one and get creative, you can do that as well. So as always, I thank you guys so much for watching. I really truly appreciate your time, and please make sure that you give this video a thumbs up. Please make sure that you are subscribed, and feel free to leave me a comment below. Take care until next time. Bye.